that are still coming in. But I think I want to be respectful of our time and also give Lyda as much time as she needs. But before we do that, I do want to um, just kind of go over a couple of things. Um, First of all, we are trying to help some individuals, and um, we were talking just before everyone came on, um, individuals that we're trying to assist, and it's really Terry's trying to help a young woman, and I have two individuals I'm trying to help. There is some housing. I've talked to was able to talk to a couple of these individuals, and we're working on some things, but um, and I don't want to speak ill of anything, but in light of, you can talk about Senate Bill 475 that we talked about yesterday. But fortunately for those who don't have SUD issues, that's not going to be a problem um, for with our properties, according to Caitlin Watson, that those don't have to be with our approved, which is encouraging because there are some properties that are going to become available for transitional housing. And um, and I'll get, I've gotten quite a bit of information on it, but there are people who really need to get this type of housing. So we are trying to help some individuals. Right now, I think we're covering these things. The other thing too I want to bring up is that we have finalized an event schedule for June the 3rd. And if you could put it on your calendar, it's Monday, June the 3rd. We're going to have the viewing of the First Step documentary. Um, I was able to finalize it with Beverly Shop, and we already have a reservation at the LaBelle Theater. Some of you may be familiar with that if you're from this area, but it's a theater that is located in South Charleston, and it is still, open for movies and also special events. So we have it reserved and scheduled for Monday, June the 3rd, beginning at 6 p.m. We'll have a panel discussion, and then following the panel discussion, well, I'm not sure which will be first, but we'll have a panel discussion, and then we'll have the viewing. I've seen the movie. It's a documentary, not a movie, but I've seen the documentary. It is outstanding. And I did not, there was so much about the First Step movement that I did not know about. And so I think you'll find it fascinating. They are going to start the process of getting the marketing done. Right now, Lyda, you have agreed to be one of the panelists, and I have another person who has agreed. And I think we're going to try to get Kenneth um, to be the other panelist. And I have another person in mind. I don't want to mention the person's name until I get confirmation. I'm sure that Kenneth will be, if he's available, will be able to be on the panel. So that's going to be something that I think will be very impactful, and just hope that it will turn out very well.
We did it in Parkersburg, and it was phenomenal.
Right.
We did it at the Smoot Theater there, and I don't know, I haven't talked about this morning, but we did a community discussion beforehand, so I don't know if we're going to do that here. But we did like a SWOT analysis of things that are working and not working in the community. But then we did the viewing of the theater and then the panel discussion afterwards. We had a city councilwoman, we had several people with lived experience on the panel, and then the producer is able to join us via Zoom, so he can answer any questions about the process with it. And so it's pretty big deal. The film crew will probably be filming us and following us that evening too.
Mhm.
It's an awesome thing, and like you
Yeah.
said, the documentary is amazing, and It brings together West Virginia and Los Angeles to go to Washington, DC. So who would have ever thought that the three would come to mix so
Yeah,
well?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I think people
wow.
find it fascinating. Now we're limited for 3 hours for that time period. That's the reservation time. I can't remember how long the documentary is. I want to say it's like between 60 and 90 minutes, somewhere in that area. So that should give us time to have a discussion on what's working, what's not working, and how we can get things get more attention to these issues. Um, and the other thing that came out of last month's meeting, which was really, I thought, amazing. I've heard John Freeman's testimony in the past, and he shared his experience, and we're thankful to Delegate Kayla Young for being available, and she spoke to the bill, the second look bill that she sponsored. She was the lead sponsor. And one of the things that came out of the discussion was trying to get a push for that bill to actually move. It stayed in judiciary. It did not move, did not get any type of attention. And one of the things that they mentioned or recommended was seeing if we can find individuals that can share how they changed while they were in prison, that people can change in prison and for the good. And so we want to try to collect, like a collage of testimonies as a way of encouraging legislators to at least allow the bill to be heard and moved. So Delegate Young indicated she is definitely going to have it sponsor it again next year. So that's something we want to work on as well. So, but I want to welcome everyone this morning. David, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you. Everyone's familiar to me, although Jen, Carl, you may have been on this before. I don't know if you're new to this Reentry Council, but if you want to briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. I think I've been on once or twice. I am the outreach coordinator for the Northwood Health Systems Crisis Unit. So we're located in the Northern Panhandle, but I try to get on some of these all throughout the state just because we take referrals from all over the state. So we are a dual facility, so we can accept substance use disorder and mental health crises. We're a short-term stay, about 5 to 7 days. And our goal is to get symptoms stabilized, make referrals, and then connect clients to follow-up care. So we can send them to rehab, outpatient services, whatever they need. So yes, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being with us. And I thought maybe I've seen you before, but I couldn't remember. But it's glad to have you with us this morning. And Heidi, good morning to you. And Bonnie, I'm not sure if your name looks familiar. You want to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Bonnie Helvey. I'm with Indivior. So we supply different pharmaceutical products, so specifically Sublocade and Perseris to the criminal justice segment. So whether it's a prison, jail, my big effort right now, just a personal thing that I'm really working on, is transition of care, making sure that inmates, when they're coming out into reentry, that they're continuing or able to continue on with their care. So I've been working a lot on that, and I appreciate you for having me. I think this is my second time on the call, so
Okay.
thanks.
I think I saw your name on the list because I normally um, print out the chat box and all the information there. So
Yeah.
thank you we appreciate you being with us. So I think at this point I just
I
want
wanted to say hi. I finally found my audio. So good morning.
Well, I know what you meant. I know what you meant.
Yeah, I was like, I can't find it. But anyway, here we go.
Good to see you, David, and Mark. I've already talked to you briefly, and we won't talk about the Red Sox or the Yankees, but I'm kind of concerned about my team. But your Yankees look pretty good.
Yeah, we don't want to talk baseball. I mean, especially with David on here. He had a bad loss last night.
Oh, wow. Okay. But yeah,
Kenneth, good to see you this morning.
You as well. Sorry I have been gone for a while, but I've been very, very busy. But I'm glad to be back and see everybody again.
Yeah, I know you are. You're definitely busy. And I do appreciate your help. I did talk to, I can't remember the woman that you had referred me to.
Lisa Moy.
Yeah. I did talk to her. She said that, we would have to do something in September. I guess they're transitioning. They have new head is coming in, head of the department. And so I said,
Yes.
we'll try to touch base with her in September or August or September, something like that, whenever she's on board or the new person will be on board. And I did not try to contact anyone in the University of Charleston. I don't really know anyone. I think you had mentioned someone there.
Yeah, just let me know. I can try to reach out down there. I'll get you a contact again. That's not a problem.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, I'm going to hand this over to Lida. Lida, do you need to share your screen?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to make you co-host.
Sharing screen is always terrifying. Got to make sure, prepare my
Yes.
screen here.
All right, so you are now the co-host, and you can
Okay.
just press on that green button there, share your screen.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you,
For those
John.
of you who don't know, Lida is with the American Friends. Tell me the whole acronym because I can't.
Service Committee, American Friends Service Committee,
Service Committee.
the
And
Quakers.
but she is very active. You'll see her in the legislative committees and others that work in the organization. They do a yeoman's work in trying to advocate for criminal justice reform. And usually around this time, actually for the last several years in a row, I've called on Lida to kind of give us a legislative update. It's always proves to be informative, usually right around April when the session's just completed, April or May. And she keeps up with all the legislation, bills that passed, bills that did not pass, bills that should have been heard that weren't, and things of that nature. So I thought it'd be very informative for us to kind of know what's going on and what happened during the 2024 legislative session. So Lida, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Sylvia. Thank you. It's great to be here. Hi, everyone. Like John said, I'm Lida Shepherd, and I'm with American Friends Service Committee. We are really an economic justice policy advocacy group. And so that naturally is why we have one of our focuses, among others, as far as, food, access to food, really protecting the social safety net around Medicaid and SNAP. And then, of course, what I'll particularly talk about today is the criminal legal system and, just what we can do from a policy perspective to just really what I think of as like reducing the footprint of the carceral system on people's lives so that, I often say that it's, when your only tool is a hammer, all your problems look like a nail when, that's why I think of like the reentry councils and all the work that you do as just being so devoted to all the different tools that people need. So we're not just responding to the crises of homelessness and poverty and substance use disorder with a hammer. And really it feels more and more these days that we're kind of criminalizing, mental health crises, all of these kind of related crises with the criminal legal system instead of what I know many of you all are devoted to providing to people. So what I hope to do, and tell me, and I will actually like show of hands, if you think it would be helpful, because I'll just skip over it if it's not, to kind of actually do a legislative website overview very, very briefly, just as far as like the website actually really is a very useful tool for following the legislative process. So show of hands, would this be useful? It would probably take like 5 minutes. Okay, all right, that's all I needed. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and just so what I'll do is I'll just do a kind of a quick kind of a legislative website 101 of just, you know, everything from where you can find bills introduced, the legislative calendar, how you can learn more about specific legislators, and checking committee agendas, which all of us, you know, are just like live in terror during legislative session, checking committee agendas, just like, oh my God, like what is going to be on the agenda today? And then after that, we'll sort of go through some of sort of the big, bad, and the ugly of legislative session. You know, things there has been, I'll just kind of say briefly, from just say the perspective of the last 8 years or so, you know, we really had, I feel like, I think it was sort of the window of opportunity politically on these issues was really open there for a while, and we really kind of like hit it with all we had. And you know, some of you all remember this. This is when we were able to expand the expungement law. This is when we were able to end the ban on SNAP for people with drug felony convictions. This is when we were able to stop suspending licenses for people with unpaid fines. And so we sort of had a really good run there. Things have sort of shifted politically at the state capitol to where we've really had to shift to a defensive posture. And, you know, where what is now we can feel really victorious about was like stopping really, really, really bad ideas, like reinstating the death penalty as one example. But I'll get into some of what we stopped, and then that'll be sort of like the bummer portion of the of our time together, and then we'll sort of look forward to some of the things that actually were, you know, that did pass, some of the good things, and then what we hope to sort of build some people power around in the years to come, particularly around second look sentencing, like John mentioned. So, all right, without further ado, let me make sure, can I do this? Yes, I can. Share. All right, can I see a thumbs up that you all can see this? Anyone? Bueller? Does it look good? All right, thanks, Derry. Thanks. All right, so you'll see, so this is legislative website. This is, you know, wvlegislature.gov. You can see here just on, this is the home page, some of the interim right here where my mouse is. These are some of the interim meetings. And I want to highlight this because the interim meetings are really good. You know, I won't assume that many of you all are in Charleston, but generally, except for the exception of the September interims, those will be in Parkersburg. And so I think we should make a, for those of you maybe in the Parkersburg area, sort of, you know, that's a way of engaging people in that area, knowing that the entire legislature is going to be descending on Wood County at that time. But I highlight it because it really is, it's sort of like the legislative downtime. They're not in, you know, the governor likely is going to call a special session to deal with the budget later in May after the primary. But these legislative interim meetings generally, like they're not passing, they don't what we call gavel in and therefore can make law, but they just have meetings. They hear from folks. You know, some of the things that we've done over the years is we seek to basically get our issues on the agenda and say, hey, Judiciary, Joint Judiciary Committee, we would love it for you to hear from folks around, say, second look sentencing, and just sort of introducing the concept to them. So not only is it an opportunity to get some of, say, our work, what we are seeing on the ground, and sort of give them a sense of what is happening in the realm of reentry, or what is happening in the realm of the recovery community. But it's also just a good chance, if you are in the Charleston area, just to kind of set up meetings and kind of build those relationships. We know in West Virginia that like relationships really are just so fundamental. Like it's who you know and it's who you know. And if you don't know them, well, who knows them? And so, so yeah, so putting those on your calendar, and you know, we definitely, as American Friends Service Committee and sort of our the Criminal Law Reform Coalition, try to sort of get the word out about that. If it is like, I know it can feel, for those who've never been to the legislature, many of you all have, it can feel like, what? I'm not just gonna like walk in the door and wander around. It is a very like confusing place that you can easily get lost in. I still get lost in there after all these years. But to just, yeah, reach out to us and say, hey, like we'd love to, we love like Kenny Matthews, my colleague. We love walking around with people and you know, chasing down legislators together. It's actually kind of fun. Okay, so that's the interim meetings. The other thing I'll point out is down here, it's kind of hiding down at the bottom, is the bulletin board. This is where you would go to just see, all right, what are the bills that are introduced today? Now, right now it's a little bit funny because they're not in session, but you just say like House bills to be introduced. And so these are like all the dates of, you know, starting from the first day of the first day of legislative session, and you can just sort of see what the bills are that were introduced that day. So it's sort of just a way of going, okay, like what's coming down the pike. And the other thing I wanted to share is just committee agendas. I mentioned the peril, the fear we live in when we check committee agendas. But so this is the, say the House side. You saw me click on the House. These are all of the committees. You can say, okay, Judiciary, that's where a lot of things related to criminal law either go to live or die. And so you can see who was all on that committee. And then I'll just go back and you can also see what the agenda is for that day. So obviously this isn't current, this is from towards the end of legislative session. And what is really nice, what we are grateful to the folks who manage this website, is that you can actually now just click on whatever the bill is, and that takes you right to the bill language itself. Relating to recovery residences, there it is. So you can check that out. The other thing that I just wanted to point out, two more things, is so I shared how you can see who all is on that that committee. So let me just click on jails and prisons. That's also, you know, often some of our issues are we either want to see them go through this committee, or if we're in a defensive posture, we're like, please, no, please don't put that on the committee agenda, because just to speak in very like kind of plain terms as far as the process, you know, a bill is introduced, it is assigned to or referred to a committee. Maybe it's referred to 2 committees. Maybe it's referred to 3 committees, which is, you know, a signal from the leadership that they do not want that bill to pass if they reference it to 3 committees, because what that means is that that bill has to be put on the agenda, heard by the committee, and then on and on and on through the entire committee process. So one thing that I just is very handy is that you can, so this is Dave Kelly, he's the chair of the jails committee, is you can actually just kind of see a bit about them. You can see, for example, what other legislation is that they've sponsored. He sponsored a lot. Look at all of that. You can also, some have more on their bio than others, but you can sort of see, you know, maybe what other affiliations they have. And I mention that just because when you are, you know, when we are, say, forging a new relationship with a legislator, it's really helpful to be able to say, hey, you know, say we're wanting to move them and get them, say, to support second look sentencing, or wanting them to support expanded expungement. Then we can say, oh, hey, I saw you, you know, sponsored some other bill that's maybe related. Thank you so much for that. And then, everyone likes to we sort of try to open with praise as much as we can and then take it from there. The last thing that I'll mention from the legislative website, and this is for you folks who can't make it to the state capitol during session, which is totally understandable. But this is the streaming. I again went to this main page. This is the streaming video and audio for so you can watch how the House of Delegates chamber when they're in floor session. You can watch the Senate. And then you can also, in the case of Senate committees, over here, actually watch the Senate committee meetings. You can, for the House, you can actually listen in. So they don't have like the video capability in the House. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing
Lyda, before you,
and welcome questions about that.
yeah, I was hoping before you left that that you tab on that bill status, which to me
You
is
got it.
one of the more important things when the session's in.
Yep.
The that bill status tab there, when you press on it, you can type in the number of the bill, and it will tell you where in the legislative process it is, whether it's still in committee, has not moved out of the committee, has been heard, has been amended, has gone to the floor. It's a very important. This is what the House Bill 4021, which is a second look at. You can see who and what the lead sponsor was. And then when you scroll down, you'll see that it was introduced to the judiciary, but it never moved. It was introduced to judiciary, and that was it. It just stayed in the committee.
And
No-
by contrast, I'll just share, this is House Bill 4998, which was a bill we were supporting that modified penalties for third offense shoplifting. So it essentially, like as the law was before, there was mandatory incarceration for third offense shoplifting. I can't think of a more like criminalizing poverty bill than that. There's just the idea that so it essentially removed that mandatory incarceration at third offense shoplifting. So yeah, you can see who all the sponsors were. You can see some of what happened in the amendment process in the committee. And so this is a lot more of a longer list because it was a bill that actually went through the entire process. So from bottom to top, you can see it was filed for introduction, and then it passed the House, and then it went over to the Senate, went through the same committee process, passed both, and then was signed by the governor. So that was one of our wins this session. Any questions about that? I know that's just kind of a big kind of website scramble. Or even just about the process itself. Clear as mud. Okay, cool.
Well, I guess
Well,
I wanted to say thank you for walking us through that because I was in session and this past go around, but this side, I mean, I've jumped around a little bit with it, but you walked it through it was very helpful to me. So hopefully the rest of the group feels that way. But thank you for doing that. No one actually
yeah,
is.
absolutely. Absolutely. It really is. It's a tremendous, it's a fantastic resource. And so I couldn't kind of recommend it enough as far as it just being a way of just following things. Bonnie?
Same here. That was really helpful. Question: if you find someone that is sponsoring a bill, what's the best way to get a hold of them? Do you normally call and make an appointment, or you just chase them down? Just trying to figure out the best way to.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It's a great question. So in the case of if it is a senator, the senators have assistants. So that's kind of dreamy because you can actually just call their office number and someone will answer. And in the off season, that's maybe a little less true, but they certainly you can leave a message, and generally they're good about getting back to you. So in the case of senators, you can schedule appointments very easily through their office assistants. In the case of the House, that is not true. And it kind of depends, it is gold if you can get a cell phone number for a delegate. I mean, these days, like the amount of like just texting, like lobbying via texting we do is ridiculous. We're just, they're in committee and we're just like blowing them up text via text. But obviously, if you don't have that relationship yet, you haven't like gotten that coveted cell phone number, in the case of House members, some are good about emailing back, especially if it is in the off season. If it's during legislative session, good luck getting, and so it just depends on the delegate to the extent that they really are responsive on their email. And I would say the same about leaving a message on their office line. I think it's sort of like hit and miss.
Bonnie, that resource, the website there does have their contact information. It does have,
Yes.
if you click on their picture or there might be a hyperlink, but there will be what they would call their work email. It's like the Senate or the House. It will go to their email that's assigned to them by the legislature. They might have they'll have their office. All of these individuals have an office in the Capitol building. So there's a telephone number for that, and you can talk to their secretary. There are some that might have an alternative email that might be their personal email. So it kind of depends, as Lyda was saying. But if you go on that website, all the contact information is right there.
Yeah, thanks, Lida. That was awesome.
Mhm.
Bonnie, I would like to add a couple things. So I started my practicum for Bowles and Rice Law Firm over the last 8 weeks. I'm gearing up for law school the fall of 25. So I met a lot of attorneys that are in legislative process. Some other channels to consider if you cannot reach out to your sponsor. One thing is just attending the committee hearings. Please remember that. That goes a long ways. Also, written testimony. A handwritten letter goes a long way. And remember to reach out to the other legislators that are part of the bill also, if you cannot, get in touch with that sponsor. So there are other channels to consider when it does come to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do want to make, just kind of reiterate something that Lyda mentioned, the ebbs and the flows of the legislature. Lyda is so correct. I don't know how long it's been, maybe 6 years. Or maybe a little bit more, but there was a time in which re-entry and everything, that was the hot topic. And so much legislation was passed within within 2 sessions. And then, things change. And so now we're in a period of time in which there are other interests. There are so many other things that has got their attention to where, they it's a struggle to try to get their attention on some of these issues that are coming up. So we just have to keep pushing and pressing in, and things change. Things do change.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I just two things as far as contacting people. Sometimes like a trick I guess I often use, or sort of just like I sort of mentioned who who knows who you want to know. And so I'll say if it's a legislator in Wood County and I don't have a direct relationship with them, well, I know people in, I would maybe ask somebody who is in the field in Wood County, be like, hey, who does this person listen to, just to sort of like so because it's impossible, it feels relatively impossible to have a relationship with, there's 100 delegates, how could you possibly have a relationship with all of them? And then to your point, John, about the ebb and flow, is that there is such an ebb and flow, and I'd say are in an ebb, and that, it's so important that we are putting our sort of even though we have to end up spending so much time fighting really, really bad ideas, and I'll get into some of what those really, really bad ideas were this past session, but it's so important that we have that proactive agenda, because we can point to, you know, when they're looking at reentry, you know, often, and this was one of the bills that we fought this year, was they actually, no, I'm sorry, this year the past couple of years, you know, they've wanted to extend supervision for people with drug felony convictions to 10 years, an additional 10 years of supervision after somebody has completed their initial, you know, incarceration and period of supervision on parole. And, you know, so we're able to say, no, this isn't what we need. We don't need more extended supervision. What actually, like, here is an actual proactive, holistic policy proposal that actually would help, whether that's like, you know, like we, you know, would say like the Jobs and Hope program is something that's really working. And, oh, are you familiar with the Reach Initiative and the reentry councils? That's something that is, you know, really, really helpful. Or have you thought about, you know, one thing we talked about is earn time off of your supervision. So it's as much as we, yeah, have to spend time in playing defense, having that proactive agenda is so important. And for me, what I value so much about the reentry councils, and like you all doing sort of, you know, I think of as just like your boots on the ground, walking that walk with people in reentry, is that you all know, and you're working with the people who know, like, what are the things that are what I think we focus a lot, of course, understandably, of like, oh, there's all these barriers, there are all these barriers, but how can we create a focused fix, you know, because we can't fix it all, but what are some of these discrete fixes that we can kind of zero in on and say, okay, well, let's make some progress on the ID problem and the fact that people are leaving, you know, without an ID that's workable. And that's just one example. There's so many. So unless there's anything else, I'll kind of just get into some of the bummer of what we were fighting. I've alluded to some of them. You know, there was really a strong push from the Senate President, Craig Blair from the Eastern Panhandle, to reinstate the death penalty. You know, the death penalty was declared not cool in West Virginia. I believe it was in the 70s. So, you know, this has been, which, you know, was a hard won thing that people who came long before I did said, you know, this is contrary to evidence. There's no evidence that supports that, you know, having the death penalty deters crime. It's very expensive. It is often, very, you know, people are proven innocent. There's just, there's so many, a legion of problems. And one of the things that we would point out often to the legislature when we were fighting this was the cost of it. You know, if we couldn't move people on sort of the immorality of it, maybe even the hypocrisy of it, we could say this is really, really expensive. And these dollars, like we're talking millions and millions of dollars, would be so much better spent elsewhere to prevent crime and to, you know, really say help people in reentry. So that is one we were, yeah, that was looking like it was going to get some traction. Another bill, and this is again where we really protecting the gains of the past is huge in this political environment. It felt like momentous that there was an effort by Jason Barrett, and I'm naming names here because I'm naming names. This is public information. Senator from the Eastern Panhandle, Jason Barrett, who, just fun fact, is actually married to the lobbyist for the bail industry. He was introduced a bill that would basically prohibit magistrates from setting a personal recognizance bond for people charged with felonies. Right now, and it's a patchwork as far as whether magistrates are already granting personal recognizance bonds for in felony cases. But what we were able to do, you know, just through the public defenders, and we were able to say, like, hey, in a lot of these counties, they're doing this. And by the way, and probably many of you all know this, like, what percentage right now of our regional jail population are pretrial, are being held pretrial? Just quick pop quiz. Anyone know? What percentage of people in our regional jails are being held pretrial? They have not been convicted of a crime.
I'm gonna guess probably 30-40%.
85.
65.
Heidi, you want to
80.
weigh in on that?
I say 90.
90.
I say 85.
You say 85, Terry. It's over half. It's like, say, I think it hovers around 52, 55%, give or take. Which, is it's not 85, but it is like entirely unacceptable. And it's really, of course, expensive too. I won't kind of delve in. I could give a whole diatribe and an entire lecture and discussion about how problematic pretrial detention is. But it's bail reform is something that we've worked on in the past, sort of in our heyday when we were able to get a bunch of things through. And they were kind of going back and really just trying to take us backwards as far as but really, a lot of the magistrates were with us on this. They said, why are you tying our hands? It was just sort of really felt like an overreach to say, tell magistrates, it doesn't matter what the case is. It doesn't matter what the context is for the case in front of you. We are telling you, you cannot give a personal recognizance bond. So there's a lot of funny business that went on with this bill, but ultimately, thankfully, we prevailed and it did not pass. And of course, again, just sort of pointed out the potential costs of this. I mean, you look at the cost to counties of pretrial incarceration, and they are pretty immense. And this would have made it a heck of a lot worse. The other one that I'll mention was Senate Bill 154, which was actually introduced by my senator. I live in Greenbrier County now. I was in Charleston for a long, long, long time. Still miss it. But I'm in Greenbrier County. And so my senator, Vince Deeds, introduced Senate Bill 154, which would make simple possession a felony and would triple penalties for many, many drug offenses. So this was, we called it the war on drugs, like Death Star bill. I think what he was trying to do, at least purportedly, was he said, oh, this is a way to get people into, say, drug court, sort of like kind of creating this like, well, if they don't go to drug court, if they don't, say, comply with certain conditions, then it becomes a felony. And so I think in his mind, I think he was trying to sort of create incentives, but the reality that we tried to point out is like, not all counties have these services. Not all counties have drug courts, so you are basically setting people up to fail, to absolutely 1,000% saddle more people with felony convictions and, subject them to more prison time. So, again, just it did pass the Senate. It actually passed the Senate on the first day of the legislative session, and I think this is where these networks, we really rely on just the networks of, say, the reentry councils, the recovery community, to just light them up on this and say, oh my gosh, this is the last thing. This is the last thing West Virginia needs. This is really kind of taking us backwards. So those are some of the bummers, but really we celebrated because it was hard-fought victories to fight them and make it so they didn't pass. And so I just cannot say enough of how impactful it is to just stay as engaged as you can. Like this for me, this is part of my job. So I'm able to stay as engaged as I am. We've been over the years able to kind of raise funds to hire people like Kenny Matthews to be a lobbyist. Kenny was incarcerated for 12 years. He knows a lot about reentry. He has direct experience with the perils of reentry, the challenges of reentry. And so that kind of paying attention, and also I think what we try to do and can always do a better job is just sort of getting the word out as things are happening. Things happen really, really fast. We try to do a good job of saying like, hey, oh my gosh, like call your delegate, call your senator. This is crazy. And we'd love for them to hear from you because it truly, truly does. In what I love about West Virginia, I love so many things about West Virginia. And sometimes it feels like unrequited love, but what I love about West Virginia is, and particularly around the legislature, is like it's so accessible. You know, other people live in states where it's like it's not a very accessible legislature, but I do love that, and nothing is ever guaranteed, but it is a relatively accessible place where, like I said, if you don't know the legislator, chances are you know somebody who knows knows that legislator. So I'll talk about now just a few bills that did pass. I mentioned the third offense shoplifting bill. The other bill, and I was going to drop these in the chat so you can just sort of read them for yourselves. 4399, this was, oh, I'm sorry. It's actually was, sorry, getting lost in my tabs here. But so bills that passed, there's also Senate Bill 269, which is related to drug test strip bills, that drug test strips, basically no longer classifying them as paraphernalia. Essentially, you know, we were calling them, you know, it is essentially legalizing drug test strips. We had, I think, last year passed one related to fentanyl. Obviously, we know fentanyl is a scourge. It's in everything. And apparently they don't even give fentanyl test strips out anymore because it's just sort of a given. It's like fentanyl is in everything. So the test strips are almost like it's a moot point. And it doesn't tell you like how much is in it. But anyway, I'm sure one of you can tell me way more about that. I'm know enough to sound stupid talking about it. But what this bill did was just essentially say, you know, we know all these other like bad illicit substances are getting into substances that are being bought, and so what this says is like basically as we have to develop test strips for these different really dangerous substances, we can no longer would any test strip be criminalized. So feels really marginal. It kind of is marginal, but when this legislature has been pretty antagonistic towards any kind of harm reduction. I'm sure many of you all know that just like they're really kind of not not of the belief that, you know, the harm reduction clinics are the sound public health policy and practice that I think we all know that they are. And so this is actually a big deal because I think when we first started talking about drug test strips, it says, well, doesn't that just make people then use more? You know, doesn't that just sort of like enable people to use drugs? And it's just like, sir, ma'am, people are using drugs. We want to keep them alive. We want them to live another day. Dead people do not recover. And so therefore, whatever we can do to keep them alive, let's do that. So in any case, the other, so bills that we did not get passed, I'll mention a bill that Amy Summers introduced. It was House Bill 5565, and I do have the tab open for this, and I will drop it in the chat. It essentially required the DMV to provide identification cards for eligible released people. It says inmates, but we believe in people first language, and so inmates doesn't sound very cool. People who are being released from incarceration. And this did not pass. It you know, worked its way through the committee process, but essentially what it would have said was to have DMV actually have a mobile unit. Other places have these where it's a mobile unit to create the IDs, to go into the facilities, to actually create a state ID for people prior to release. So that's one that, as I understand it, instead of it passing, I think one of the senators who was is very, I think, attuned to, compassionate about reentry issues. Senator Clements from, I think, Wetzel County, they sort of made a deal at the end that they were going to pilot the idea in Huntington. So if anybody's in the Huntington area, that's sort of one to watch, and one to sort of track. And then the other one that I'll mention, and just sort of, I guess, put a finer point on, I know some of you all heard from Delegate Kayla Young last month around second look sentencing. That her bill was fantastic. It was, but it was not as specific than the bill that I'm going to drop in the chat here that we got introduced in the Senate. And I'll just share a little bit about the importance of people talking and sharing their story about this, because so Delegate Young's bill was very, it's what I would say is like anybody would be eligible, almost anybody would be eligible to petition to have a second look at their sentence for people who are serving very, very long sentences. What we had introduced in the Senate by a Republican, Senator Woodrum from Summers County, was specific to young people who were young when they were sentenced. We sort of, the calculus here is that it was maybe a more palatable, kind of an easier sell, sort of let's get our foot in the door for second look sentencing for people who were between the ages of 18 and 25 when they were sentenced to a lengthy sentence. And yes, if you're sentenced to a lengthy sentence, chances are that was a crime of violence. People get all very, very, very touchy about this. And what we did was, for those of you who probably many of you know Danny Hale, he works with Ravar. Danny Hale was sentenced when he actually think was 17. I'm getting the facts of his story wrong, but anyway, he went into a long stint of incarceration for murder when he was 18. I feel comfortable telling you all this because he's very open about it. And so he came to this initial meeting with Senator Woodrum, where we laid out, he shared some of his story about his conviction at the age of 18, and how after 10 years, and he was really able to say, yeah, after 10 years of being incarcerated, I think he was mostly at Mount Olive, like, I was a different person. And one of the arguments, I guess, that we use, sort of the case that we make around second look sentencing, particularly around young people, is just this, what we know about brain development, and that, you know, your brain is still developing up until your lower 20s. And that he was able to tell Senator Woodrum that he was fundamentally a different person after 10 years, that said how he wasn't able to be in his daughter's life. And that was just really, really hard for his daughter, because his daughter's mom was suffering substance use disorder. And that also he was able to say that if there was something on the books around second look sentencing, it would really give people and families so much hope. And that when people have hope, people then do better, behave better, and that it would actually make for a lot more sort of improved morale inside these facilities. Knowing that, like, because of course, like, this idea of second look, it's not like they just open the door. The idea is like, review the facts, get victim impact statements, like really talk to all interested parties, look at what somebody did while they were incarcerated, how did they spend their time. And I think just really leaning into, like, if you say this is about rehabilitation, well, then maybe we can show that people have been rehabilitated and don't need to stay incarcerated for 40 years. So I share all that to just share that at the end of the meeting, Senator Woodrum agreed to be the sponsor of this bill, of the Senate version of this bill related specifically to youthful offenders, youthful people who are convicted of crimes at a young age. And the reason that we really went after partly why we went after Senator Woodrum. He's a Republican. You all know we have a Republican supermajority, and so you really ideally want a Republican sponsor of your bill. It doesn't mean, you know, that taking nothing away from say Kayla Young's bill. It's a fantastic bill, but she was sort of she knows the political reality. She was like, yeah, get a Republican. And so at the end of the meeting, we were leaving and sort of saying our goodbyes, and Senator Woodrum looked Danny Hale straight in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry you were locked up for so long." And it was just this beautiful moment of just like taking like what you in your mind is like, oh, well, he was convicted of murder. Obviously, he's just this terrible, awful person. Like, we never should be, you know, among us. It's like, no, it's Danny. He's a fantastic human being. He's an amazing dad and now granddad and doing so much for his community. So anyway, it's so looking forward, that is what we're hoping to see more of. And so I will just say, as far as the second look sentencing, you know, we're going to be kind of ramping up sort of our story collection around that and just really kind of networking with families and people incarcerated on that. So, okay, I've talked way too long. So I'm going to be quiet mostly, but wanted to just share a couple things that are coming up. And this is actually a conference that is happening at West Virginia Wesleyan. Krisha knows a couple things about this. It's a restorative justice conference, and that's happening at West Virginia Wesleyan in June. I really, really like, when I think of just where I think our society needs to go, it is towards restorative justice. It is towards actually repairing harm in a more just in a more meaningful way, and really actually rethinking, well, are people being held accountable for this? Like, what is our sort of conception of accountability, and kind of reimagining what real accountability is for harm. So I'll mention that, and then I'll also share, this is for people who are interested in kind of digging more into the policy process. Terry, I might put you on the spot if you want to share anything about your experience at the Summer Policy Institute. It's going to be at Marshall this year in July. But yeah, it's for people who are, yeah, Terry, I don't know if you want to, I'm going to put you on the spot, but.
You already know I do. I'm itching to tell my story of change and what I'm doing today, and I would like to help people get out of prison. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so please consider joining us at the Summer Policy Institute. It's just a great kind of really interactive way of like, all right, we know there's a problem. How do we sort of turn it into a specific policy solution? How do we build coalition around that idea? How do we build allies around that concept? And how do we move it through the legislative process? So those are a couple things. So yeah, that's it.
Let me add something. Some of you who may or may not know, but another bill that passed, Lyda and I talked about it yesterday, and we talked about it earlier this morning. The Senate Bill 475. It now requires that if you have any type of housing for reentry, that if it is not WVA approved, then that housing facility cannot receive any type of funds that come from Medicaid, that comes from SNAP, TANF, anything of that nature. And it's a stiff penalty, could be anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000. And it creates some issues because now if a person is within a facility that's been there and that they are not WVA approved, the facility is not, then they are not supposed to now receive any type of monies from the state. And if they do, then it's a penalty. It's a misdemeanor, and it can be there can be a monetary fine. I don't understand this bill. Don't understand how it passed, but it's only making matters worse. I don't know if any of you have run into that problem, but that's now a law. I don't know when it's effective, but it passed the legislature this past session, And, you know, to me, it's a major setback because not all of these facilities can pass WVA. And a lot of these facilities are serving individuals, nevertheless. And some of them are probably receiving monies from Medicaid. And if they have to stop, then some of these individuals are going to be asked to leave. Or the
John,
facilities. Yeah, go ahead.
We're right in the heart of that right now. Mark and I are, because, you know, being Liberty Center, being a transitional center, we're trying to define, okay, is that for sober living housing? Is, you know, what are the actual requirements for that? So we're like right in the heart of that, and we're trying to gather as much information on that bill too, because it greatly impacts us in a negative
Right.
way.
Right. And it does impact sober living. I talked to a couple of parole officers yesterday, and they indicated that things have gotten worse. It's making it more difficult for them. And they indicated that it does not affect housing that is transitional, that is not involving any type of SUD treatment, which is good, but there's not that many housing units out there for that. Sober living comes under that umbrella. If you're offering sober living facilities and you are not WVA approved by this law, you cannot accept anything that comes from the state, from those individuals. Y'all getting quiet on me out there.
Well, I think that's probably a whole nother hour for me. So I'm trying to be quiet, because it's greatly impacting the success we've had at Liberty Center and Mark Harris, what he's done. And we're just trying to figure out, yes, there's no alcohol, drugs in our facility, but we're not a sober living home, we're transitional living. And so we're trying to weave our way through that. And I wish we had more information on this new bill and how that impacts, because like I say, we're trying to figure it out now. And the impact is, with a late May date, we don't want it to impact the success we've had and the residents that are being successful at Liberty Center. So maybe I'll throw that out there. Maybe that's something in the future we could chat with on the reentry.
Well, why don't we make that a point here for next month? Because I don't know what the effective date is. Normally it's 90 days after passage, but sometimes they are effective immediately upon the signature of the governor. So I'll double check that. I don't know, Lyda, if you had a
What's
chance
the
to-
bill number real quick?
It's 475.
What I was told was it's the end of May by June 1st.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. So I mean, to me, I think that bill has major impacts on a lot of. I know some already that I know that they are not WVA approved. They tried to, they could not. One of the persons told me that they were telling them how to run their business, and he says, and I can't do that. I can't allow someone to tell me how to run my business. It's one thing to tell me what I need to have, but then to tell me how to spend my money, to tell me how I am to operate and so forth. And they just couldn't do it. You got the Anchor Project out there. You got Oxford. You got Family Support Network. This and of course, David, what you and Mark are doing. That's it's going to have an impact that I don't even know how you're going to deal with it. So why don't we bring that up? Maybe we could even have someone. How would you all feel about having someone from WVA? We do know some people from there that, you know, maybe they can speak to it, and maybe there's some intricacies that we're not aware of. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that would be good, John. Mark and I, we met with Rivar within the past week. They toured the facilities. So we're familiar with Rivar. I think what Mark and I are trying to determine is who's making that call, because it sounds like it's almost at the DOC or the parole office level that's making that. So I think any input would be helpful.
Yeah, let me say, David, I do know that the parole officers, in particular, the head of each parole within a county does have some, and they're really afraid. You know, they're afraid that they have assigned people and where they assign them. And so they're trying to be above, they're trying to be within the law. And so they may have approved a parole to live in a certain place, and now they're finding out, oh, you're not with our approved, and now it's becoming more strict. And so the parole officers do have some influence in that. I do know that from talking to them. And now with this passage of law, so I think what we can do is see if we can, well, first of all, talk about the bill, bring it up. It's in I think what Mark's saying is it sounds like it's going to be effective this month. And then maybe if we can get Wava to speak to it, how are they going to deal with this? The law is plain. I mean, it's very explicit. It's a misdemeanor to accept any monies from and it says included but not limited to Medicaid, TANF, SNAP, and it's a fine of anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 if you are receiving monies from individuals in some of these facilities, if you're not WAVA approved.
But that's what we talked about with VAR. Like, we're one of the few facilities we don't charge anything for our guys
Okay.
at all. And they went to, we didn't even know anything about it, and they went to the parole office to go meet, and they was like, hey, we're removing you guys from the program by the beginning of June because we're not VAR certified.
Yeah.
Well,
And
without contacting us,
right.
so David got on it, and we got a hold to stop that, but we can't accept any more guys until we get this situated.
Exactly. And the parole board, the parole officers now are having to check and see where they place people and approved. And now, they may have to pull people. Like what you're saying is that's what's starting to happen. Is that what you're saying, Mark?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. They're starting to pull guys, and which is hurtful for them because they've already started a process of getting their life on track. Now they're going to be set back. Like, you can have a guy here in Charleston working, and they might uproot and move him to another county.
Yeah.
Can I say something about that? I would like to say something. In Huntington, I have at least 2 people right now that are homeless and not being violated via their parole officer because they were removed from their uncertified house.
Yeah.
Homeless, like the parole officer is okay with that. Like one of them, they're actually leaning on me to find him housing. I'm like, oh my God. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, one thing Mark will tell you is that our success rate at Liberty Center, and this is not just in the last year, this last decade, has been 95% success rate. So how you're not seeing that this would be a detriment, it's mind blowing. But we're just trying to
have a controversial comment.
Go ahead,
because
Jenny.
I accept volunteers from lots of different places, and I've spoken with people who are on the LeVar team, and what we saw in South Charleston were people who were able to get a house, and then they would have young women come from incarceration who were in vulnerable places, and there was clearly no treatment for them. So I think that obviously they should be able to receive Medicaid and SNAP, but are people vulnerable if houses are not approved, if facilities are not approved? It's just a question that I have. Maybe someone could answer that, but it does seem like it does create some kind of vulnerability for certain people.
Okay. Well, Lida, Chris, I don't know if you wanted to speak on something.
Yeah, I just, One, we are recovery and reentry, there's no housing available if you don't have SUD. There is no transitional housing. So, it's really difficult to find housing for anyone that doesn't have anything, in their past. So, SUD related. But
Well,
really what I was something that Lyda had talked on, I wanted to thank Tina and Terry. Ms. Edna was there. Mark, I don't know if you were there a lot. And the last Tuesday we had the Being Free documentary shown at the Capitol Theater, and it was a second chance workforce event. So anybody that was able to come to that, it was a good crowd, and it was just a really good event to promote second chance employers and second chance event workforce. So thank you for everybody that was able to come to that last week. And then Lyda, I'd also mentioned the summer workshops. Bev and I did a reentry simulation, and I know that's something we've talked about doing in your area, but we did it at Concord University a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really impactful event. And we had about 45 participants after the first round. Everyone but 2 people ended up in jail. CPS was called numerous times on the parents that had regained custody of their children. So it is a very interactive, eye-opening experience. So, it takes us a lot of volunteers and a lot of time to run it, but that's something definitely we need to consider doing.
Well, that sounds exciting, and I know we've passed our time, so I don't want to go too much further, but I do want to thank Lyda. I know she had to leave, but she put in the chat box, I think, a good idea. I think what we'll do, David, Mark, and we'll have something for June's interim. But I do want to remind everyone, June 3rd is when we'll have the viewing of the first step. And there'll be quite a bit of information going to be circulated. Bev is going to start that process of the marketing. And and then the June meeting is scheduled for the 12th, June, the second Wednesday. We'll see if we can contact the lead sponsor of Senate Bill 475, Takubo. And Lyda said that she can assist in that. I think it would be good if we can get someone from WAVA, maybe someone who's, the person who sponsored the bill, and then you guys can kind of express, the impact that this is going to have on you. So I think that's something we're going to work on. We'll definitely devote that next month for this discussion, and see how hopefully we can get something put together.
Thank
Okay.
you, John. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Good.
Glad to see you all, and had a good discussion. We'll we'll keep you guys informed, but again, put it on your calendar, June 3rd, Monday, June 3rd, at the LaBar Theater in South Charleston, and you'll see more information being released on that. Okay. All right, everyone. You all have a great.
Thank you.
We'll see you. See you, Mark.
Thank you.
See you, David.
Go Orioles.